Hello, everyone. Morning, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello. Hmm. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to week 7. We are halfway through. This week is called Tuning into the Soul's Blueprint. Tuning into the Soul's Blueprint. I'm going to talk about trauma and psychedelics and see if we can get to archetypes and celebrating Day of the Dead. Those are our topics for today. Let's go into our body meditation. Um, this is gonna be a little bit longer, so settle in. And I invite you to become aware of, put your attention on the pelvic bowl. And notice the energy centers of this part of the body if you're connected to energy. See if you can put your attention on the perineum, the bottom of your torso. And let your perineum breathe you. There's an invitation here to let this energy center inform some micro movements. Let your pelvic bowl dance, informed by breath, informed by energy. You can really let go and be curious about these micro movements. Could be the whole hip pelvic area wanting to dance and move a little, or it could be very small, isolated movements. It could be in front and back, within or without. Just really trust what is emerging. For those that are just joining, we have our attention and awareness on our pelvic bowl with an invitation for the perineum to be guiding the breath and micro movements to be informing the rest of us. There could be circulating energy or pulsing. It's a very powerful energy plexus for pulsations and wave patterns. And one of my somatic embodiment genius mentors, a man named Cass Phelps, talks about the wave motion as the key movement in the body that helps decondition culture, linear ways of thinking. So if you can let wave medicine or snake medicine, undulation is a doorway to that. Wave motions, positive sensations. These, he says, are the quickest ways to decondition our entire system. Whether we invite that in our hands, our torso, our feet, our pelvis, so just letting micro or undulatory movements, just letting it be a dance in the pelvic bowl. If you want to bring breath and sound into these movements, letting energy move or rise, you're welcome to do that. Let yourself receive the dance. Let it take over more of your body if that feels comfortable and safe for you. If you're in a position where it might not be flowing, you're welcome to move, sit down or stand up or shift to allow some movement there. The pelvic bowl and the wave pattern are very much featured in our module today. So feel free to bookmark this sensation, this somatic awareness, the doorway that pelvis and wave pattern can be. Very helpful in trauma unwinding, very helpful in psychedelic journeys. And just inviting a slowing down, bringing our awareness back to the perineum, regulating the breath, and coming back into awareness of the whole body. Gently settling movement, breath and sound. Letting that part of the body know we can come back and spend more time there. And when you're ready, coming back to the group. Welcome everyone on your pelvic bowls. So beautiful to see you and feel you. Week 7. Um, Anyone want to share a beloved dead? Um, Either a photo or a name, relationship with that person, a couple sentences, someone who hasn't shared yet about a beloved dead. Linda, please.
I'll share the name of my son, Mitch Cato. Um, he was born in 1969 in October 23rd, and he died September 8th this year.
Mm,
And we had a memorial service for him this Sunday.
mm. Say his name once more.
His name is Mitch or Mitchell or Michihiko. Michi. He had a lot of different names.
Michihito, I love it. Michi Kato. And where was he geographically when he passed?
He was in my apartment in Virginia.
Beautiful. Just really feeling the recentness of that passing and the recentness of his birth and the anniversary of his incarnation. Yeah, thank you, Linda. That's very tender. Thank you. Michito. Just taking a moment to integrate that. Hmm. Yeah, I'm sort of an energetically sensitive being, but I can feel the nearness of all of that. So I really am grateful for you sharing and bringing that into the circle. Thank you, Linda. Okay. I'm going to share my screen to do a quote for today. Some people like to read. I do like to read. So this is from a body of work called the Gene Keys, and it's a very important part of my spiritual path and process. And it's a body of work created by a man named Richard Rudd, who, in a very, very reduced short way to say this, is that it's a modern version of the I Ching, a modern mystical retake on the I Ching. And there's a whole wheel of the year. And as many of you might know, there are 64 hexagrams in the I Ching, an ancient system, and it's mirrored in the 64 genetic codes of our DNA. And so this gene keys synthesis and transmission is really based on, the upgraded genetic process that's happening in the human race right now. And it's a beautiful body of work. And we are, because it's tracking the wheel of the entire year, we are currently in the 28th gene key, which is a lot about death. And we are smack in the beginning of Scorpio season. So it's coinciding with this time of the year. And he says in this beautiful quote, and I have one at the end today too, to live in the continual acceptance of death means to live with the continual threat of the unexpected. The human mind would have you believe that your life's purpose lies in the future rather than here and now. So you keep postponing your life until you meet all of your fears face to face at the end. You must look deeply into your fears now in order to find purpose, because your purpose actually lies within your fears. Your purpose lies within your fears. This is why in the great mystical traditions it is said that you must die before you die. You must die before you can live. Richard Rudd has inspired this entire module pretty significantly. You'll hear me talk about this work throughout. But this idea of looking into our fears to find our purpose, looking into our fears to find our purpose. Anybody resonate with the truth of that, even though it might feel unpleasant? Oh, yeah. Whew. Perfect time for psychedelic conversation. All right. So last week we did a roadmap for self and others. We did a lot of paperwork last week. Thank you for hanging in there. We finished up the paperwork in the first bucket, which is designing our sacred decline. And we talked about wishes 3, 4, and 5 within the 5 wishes, the signature page, the storage, the notarizations. We talked about all that. We went into the most and the post form, which is a shortened version of just the facts, ma'am, for these institutions who wanted one page. Give me the facts. We talked about the do not resuscitate order. We talked about dementia directive, and then sort of the healthcare power of attorney and the redundancies. And we talked also about using the momentum of this class to really put aside time to get this paperwork done because of our human tendency to procrastinate and avoid when it comes to administrative kinds of things. We had this homework, and I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions or feedback or contemplations about all of that. Anybody feeling stuck? Anybody feeling particularly enthused that can inspire the rest of us? Becky.
I think I'm like a lot of people that I don't want to experience life in extreme dementia. So the stages in the dementia directive are the mild, moderate, and what's the last one? Severe dementia. I think it's interesting and challenging to know and to help other people know where you are in that journey. If you're into that journey, I know I was called in to help a friend who had a diagnosis of early Alzheimer's. But we aren't trying to track. So I think it's very interesting, and I'd be interested to see more how people are figuring out how to communicate ahead of time to describe to the people who need to implement their dementia directive, to know where they are in that journey.
Yeah, I'm thinking there are better and better sort of cognitive decline tests that healthcare practitioners give, and that there's a better over time. There's been better and better ways to sort of pinpoint the stages of that. So yeah, I really hear your wisdom around. It's good to actually know. It's good to have information. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else? Carl.
I said I would research this, but maybe you already know this answer, Lee. As we get older, does that limit the possibility of organ donations?
I don't know a very complex answer to that, but I have heard that even in older people, there are still some harvestable components, skin or skin grafting, or I don't completely know the details, but I think it starts to be limited. Depending on age and health, but there are always things that can be used, is my very generic answer. And Brenda,
Okay.
others may know more specifics.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're
I
going to
can do
be
some. I can do some research on that too.
Yeah, that'd be great. Weeks 8 and 9 is going to be going much more deeply into the body stuff. How do we dispose of our bodies in ways that feel aligned with our values? But Brenda may have some input.
Just real quick, you can always donate your skin and cornea, even if you die at home, that can be arranged. But we'll get into more of it soon.
Yes, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. All right. Any last, Linda? Yeah.
I was going to say the dementia directive, I did look into that also. And I looked at the version that Compassion Choices has, which is another version. And it was interesting too. So I look forward to talking to other people who are interested in this.
What were the main differences from your perspective about the Compassionate Choices version and the dementiadirective.org version?
The dementia directive had the stages of Alzheimer's pretty prominent, but the Compassionate Choices did not have that as prominent. They had more what's really going on at the end, some really graphic information. I thought looking at both of them was very helpful for me.
Okay, that's really great. I will add that link. Anna, if you could do a little research while we're working here and find the link to the Compassionate Choices Dementia document, then I can put it in last week's resources list. But it would be nice to thank you for that. That's great. Okay. A couple of housekeeping items before we move on to this week. Dale, is Dale here today? Redid a Spotify list because whatever ones we had done last year or earlier this year, we did a Spotify and a YouTube playlist. They weren't public, which means it was hard to edit them and add to them. And so Dale did one, which I will put here, which is now a public death list, which means other people besides us can add to things also. And nobody's really moderating it, but it's a fun thing to sort of, if we get inspired and we're listening to chants or songs, or there's sort of even death humorous stuff, we can just add it to the list and it can be a growing thing. So that's the new updated link. And I put that in the resources for this week as well. Anybody needing buddy support? Wanted to check in about that. Everybody doing okay with buddies? Lumen.
Yeah, I haven't been able to sync up with my buddy. We are scheduled to connect tonight, but this will be the first time that we've actually been able to hop on a call. It seems like our schedules are just like not quite synced.
Okay. Well, why don't you check in tonight, and then if it seems like, being with other buddies would be more conducive to syncing schedules or something, we can bring it back and just sort of check in. And that's, I think, part of what we can do together is be like, does anybody need to switch?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? Becky, Lubold?
This is not related to buddies, but I don't want to forget to ask, on the resources link, the slides for last week's class, the slide link is not active?
Yes, because I didn't do it.
Okay.
Thank you for noticing. And I realized today, like, oops. So I'll put them both up. I'll put last week's slides and this week's slides. And I'm relying less and less on slides. So there's not much content, but I appreciate that you noticed, and I'll get them up there.
Yeah. And I just also want to say that in the event, like next Tuesday is election day, and I will be a poll watcher. So it's not likely that I can be at class. So that's okay, as long as the resources and things are there, right?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, bless you, poll workers. And yeah, it's an intense day next week. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Hmm. Okay, one more little item of business I think I had, which is Dara. Dara put Aditi's song, I Was a Mystery, I Am a Mystery, and I Will Always Be a Mystery to Harmonium, and she's willing to lead us, which I thought would be fun for the end today if we have time. And if we don't have time, in our time slot, if Dara is able to stay, we can do it afterwards, right at the end. So I'm excited about that. Thank you so much, Dara. I love that. I love that tune and that chant. Okay. My cats are having a big old brawl behind me, making lots of noise. So if you hear stuff. Um, okay. So tuning into the soul's blueprint. This is a really powerful week. And I want to lead into this week by talking about trauma, embodied trauma. Because we talked on week 5 about trusting the body to die. And that we can only really die well by cultivating these qualities. And that sort of requires us to be in our system and in our internal experience. And we really sort of can't thrive until we bring some of these esoteric teachings into our own experience and our existence. And the biggest thing that keeps us from being in our bodies is unresolved and unprocessed trauma. And this is another inspiration from beloved Richard Rudd, who says, who has this whole thing of like, there is nothing wrong with you. We all came here to work stuff out. The shadow is part of our drama. It's part of signing up for incarnation. It's sort of the deal that we made. And in some traditions, like we get handed the script, or we even get to choose the script. Like, this is what you're headed for. This is what you're about to deal with. And I'm so grateful that we have so many trauma resources and awareness and understanding, because many of us grew up in situations where it was like, I'll give you something to cry about, like, layered on top, like our sensitivities, our emotions were just layered on top with more abuse, right? And I think what we're seeing now is those of us who have decided to be taking full responsibility for what's in us, which as we mature, we really get like, it's ours now. It might have come from previous generations, but now it's ours. And from a mature perspective, it's really on us to take responsibility for what's happening. And when we do that, we start to clear it for ourselves, and we also start to clear it for the collective and for our lineage. We are freeing ourselves up more and more. And I love the quote from Richard Rudd, and he says it often, which is, it's through our trauma that we crack open our genius. It's not just some small thing of like, okay, let me work through this, but no, it's like in those places resides our brilliance. In those places resides our brilliance. And the most important things that we've learned over the last, I don't know, it's probably just a couple of decades now, is this sort of art and science of how to regenerate, repair, is that to make sure that we are resourced before we go unpacking some of these dark places. Big piece of understanding in the trauma world. And also to be very gentle with ourselves. The path of transformation requires gentleness, patience, kindness. And then I would say a third really important piece is finding competent people to help us, because most of our trauma was created in relationship, and it takes relationship to support our nervous systems enough to unwind those pieces. So yeah, the three pieces that I see is making sure we're resourced, having a gentle path of transformation, and finding competent people to help us. I think the outcome is that as we unwind, we, Richard calls it, we find our genius or our brilliance. How I would say it is we have access to our blueprint. We have access to our true self. And, we are a secret Fibonacci sequence in here, that we can, as we dial in what's true for us, as we unpack these things, we sort of unearth more and more treasure. We relax into sort of who we are. So I put some resources in this week, but I didn't really put links because there's people with whole bodies of work. Peter Levine, super important pioneer in the work of embodied trauma. And then Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Keeps the Score is his book and his work. And then Gabor Mate has been coming out lately with this incredible body of work, interviews and films, and just a beautiful, beautiful approach. There's others, but those are enough. Yeah. Anyone want to share about how just even being in the pelvic bowl today, we store a lot of trauma on our hips. I have like chronic hip issues, and yeah, there's a lot in different places in the body. We talked about also the fascia keeping the story of our lives. And I've come to see these things as gifts. These are sort of presents that I get to unwrap, and in it is reclaiming of myself more deeply. But if we start to do that before we have the support systems or the resources, it can be quite scary. So any thoughts on this for those of you who are trauma literate or trauma informed or have done your own trauma work? Any wisdom here? Anything to add to the field?
Lee, I appreciate you sharing about the resourcing and how important that is prior to engaging, or it's part of the trauma work, the initial phase of it, I feel like. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of Peter Levine and his teaching on pendulation and titration. It's like, when we start doing trauma work, just noticing that initial like expansion. And then, we can touch in and it can feel really vulnerable and we might contract, but that's not a negative thing. It's just this it's like a wave, a dance of expansion and contraction, so that, we can, through other avenues also like increase that window of tolerance and explore the trauma in like ways that aren't going to re-traumatize us or completely take over our self energy.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Do you work, are you a trauma therapist or? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, I love this work.
Yeah, there's a lot to say. Just to just quickly define what she means by pendulation and titration. Pendulation at its very essence means we're going to stay 80% in touch with the places in our bodies that feel either neutral or positive, and then touch gently onto the ouchy, scary parts, and continue to sit back into our places that feel resourced, neutral to positive. And then just titrate means we're going to just do a little bit at a time. we're going to have, a weekly thing where we gently learn to touch into those places, right? And so those phrases come from somatic experiencing, which is Peter Levine's body of work, and we're so lucky to have it. Um, and then one of his little small little book that used to come with a DVD, and I think it's even just called Healing Trauma, now probably comes with some kind of MP3 or something, where it's basic, super, oh, here we go, little tiny book, Healing Trauma, super simple things for those of us who haven't been in our bodies, where we just even touch the back of our hand a little bit with our fingertips and say, this is my hand, it belongs to me, which starts to establish some neutrality of being here to where it doesn't feel as scary. So it's a really slow, very gentle way to start the process. And he has a whole series of books, including a book on sexual healing, healing sexual trauma. Incredible work. Super grateful for Peter Levine. Brenda.
Yeah, thank you for your emphasis on trauma being stored in the body, and it's really at a cellular level, and really needing to be in your body, and then the idea of that pendulation. I also want to add a layer of complexity about ancestral trauma. And so there's trauma passed down through our lineage. So if you have an opportunity to do some ancestral trauma releasing work with also with the component of accepting blessings of our ancestors, that's also an important part of our trauma release and healing. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I love that, Brenda. And also this piece of asking the ancestors to take back what's not ours. That's super important piece when we're doing ancestral work is we are not alone here. And because we are pioneering how to be here in the bodies, we can ask the ancestors, like, please do your part, take this back. This isn't mine. I'm working through the best I can. And there's a whole body of work that Daniel Four has done. How do you spell his last name? F-O-R-E? Is that how you spell it?
F-O-O-R.
F-O-O.
F-O-O-R.
F-O-O-R, Daniel Four. He's actually in my region. He lives in Black Mountain, but he's done incredible work in ancestral lineage healing about how to resource ourselves with healthy, well, benevolent ancestors, connection with them, and asking them to support our process. And that is incredible emergent work.
Yeah,
Heather's got the resources. She's holding up the books. I love it. Ancestral medicine.
I could also add that when we ask our ancestors to take back some of that, we also invite them to pass that trauma all the way back to spirit or source. And then I always recommend closing the loop on, then there could be a feeling of somewhat of a void. So you fill that with asking, really recognizing what are the blessings that have been passed on, because we have both. We have the burdens and the blessings that are passed on from our ancestors, and we have gifts, and we have. So the idea is to do that process, but also close that loop and receive the blessings also.
Thank you. Yeah, so many beautiful resources here. Thank you for that clarity and that sort of container of context. I will say that I've done Ray Castellino's work this year for the first time, and I did 2 womb surrounds, which is a very small group process of doing pre and perinatal trauma work. And it's probably the most profound work I've ever done. And one of the things I really gained from that is about a third of what we're working with is not ours, it's ancestral. About a third is in utero, actually. And then a third is sort of what we've encountered this lifetime. So if you're noticing big stuff, it's probably because there's big stuff that you didn't create, actually. And that actually helped me really feel like, oh, okay, there's a lot going on here that is not about my own lifetime of experiences. So if you go, Ray Castellino has passed on from his physical body about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. But there's a whole bunch of folks carrying on his lineage. And if that resonates for you, there's a bunch of people out in California, less on the East Coast, but there's a few. And you can check out the Ray Castellino womb surround is what it's called, is a real way to, from my perspective, to stand in the middle of that third, right? To sort of look at what happened in the womb, and that connects to the huge trauma that came from the lineage and what was going on at our birth. Really impactful, really helpful. And then, it helps sort of resolve what's happened in our lives because we repeat patterns. Family constellations is another great one. There's so many great resources out there. So any more on trauma? We're gonna take a little break and then move into psychedelics. Any more comments on trauma? Many names, books, resources have been named. I'm not sure if I caught them. Sure. Yeah, Madison, I will capture some of these and put them in the resources this week. I'll see if I can remember them all. Let's take a 5 minute and come back.
I was wondering the name again of the person who wrote the modern version of the I Ching.
Yeah, Richard Rudd.
Yes.
And it's called the Gene Keys. So it's GENE, like our genetic code, Gene Keys. You can actually go to genekeys.com and put in your birth information and it will give you a profile. It's basically, he's married the I Ching with astrology, and then it can like give you a profile. So then you can look at like what's happening in your own system. And no surprise, the 28th gene key that we have is in a very significant placement in my chart, which is why I talk about death all the time. So it'll be interesting. There's a codon ring called life and death. And those of us who like to talk about death a lot probably have some version of a gene key in the codon ring of death. But I will also, yeah, genekeys.com. I will add that. Other resources that I should add to the resource list. Okay. Great. All right. So psychedelics, it's it's interesting how much energy there is in this conversation around trauma, and it feels like we could spend a whole day talking about trauma. And I have a whole presentation that I've done in the communities movement about trauma, about window of tolerance, about nervous system regulation, about the vagus nerve, and sort of from a layperson's perspective. But the reason that we are talking about psychedelics instead of going into trauma is that psychedelics offer an opportunity to practice dying. And so sort of the scope of our 13 weeks together, we could expand it to 26 weeks and 52 weeks and talk about trauma and all the things, so that's part of the reason why I do a module on psychedelics. And I will start off by saying we're recording this, and the legalities around psychedelics are getting looser, but 3 of the 4 substances I'm going to talk about today are all illegal. And if you want to contact me separately, I can potentially give you some more resources. But for the purposes of this recording and this course, we're assuming that all of these experiences would be happening in a legal context, which would probably be outside of the country, or with someone who's approved to do this work. There's plenty of grassroots stuff going on. And again, we can talk about that separately. But this, for the purposes of that, this is on record, we're talking about you're finding a legal way to do this. There are some sanctified churches in this country that have permission to do these things. And I'm not that connected with them. There's ayahuasca churches, there's psilocybin churches, there's different kinds of things, but I'm going to focus on what I know, and then I would encourage or invite, finding people who are resourced in other ways. And I want to also say as a caveat, the invitation here is to explore a death practice, and that usually includes altered states, but there's lots of ways to achieve altered states: dance, meditation, shamanism, and it doesn't. My encouragement is not necessarily toward substances, but I sort of wanted you to hear what's been true for me and what might be helpful in case you want to explore this. And then research on your own is super important. There's two websites that I like a lot, and they're in the resources section as well, but I will put them here. Erowid is one. Erowid is great. It's just got endless amount of resources, from the chemical construction to the dangers to the concerns to the prices to the fatalities listed to cultural understandings to where to resource. I mean, they're just incredible. And then the other one is Psychonaut Wiki. And at the top of Psychonaut Wiki, I will tell you what psychonaut means in a second. Well, I'll tell you now because it's contextual. Psychonaut means the psyche, so the soul, spirit, traveler or voyager or navigator or sailor, like someone who wants to explore in these realms. And at the top of the Psychonaut wiki, they have this like little black box, and it says, "You've stumbled upon a door where your mind is the key. There are none who will lend you guidance. These trials are yours to conquer alone. Entering here will take more than mere logic and strategy, but the criteria are just as hidden as what they reveal. Find yourself, and you will find the very thing hidden beyond this page. Beyond here is something like utopia, and this is a mirage." So, right away as you enter this page, you're like, what? And then down at the bottom, at the very footer, it has this little sentence that says, "You are God." So, it's it's a bunch of interesting resources, and it's psychedelics is the wild, wild west. So do your research. Everything has contraindications and side effects, much like food and herbs and driving a car and living in a body. So, yeah. The other thing I'll say around psychedelics is that where I'm coming from. So I'm not formally trained in this work. There's a lot of formal training programs out there right now, formal and informal, underground, above ground. I am not. I have had a mentor, but I am not formally trained, and I'm not really formally researched. I'm not much of a deep research kind of gal. I am sort of coming from a grassroots, small scale psychonaut kind of place, which means how can we use these in an entheogenic way? And what I mean by that is I'm not much of a recreational drug user. Personally, it's not my thing. It's never been my thing. But I am very interested in psychoactive substances and experiences in a sacred spiritual container to explore consciousness. So that's where I'm coming from. and that's its own orientation. There's courses out there, really great stuff going on out there. We are in, we are in a time right now where it's a heyday for psychedelics. There's so many resources, so many that you have to be mindful of what to engage with. I would say follow your own heart and your highest guidance. Um, Michael Pollan wrote books and has a film series out about it. There's universities doing research. There's doctors' offices offering ketamine therapy, like on the up and up. And there's online places that you could sign up and they could mail you ketamine and then you sit online and do things with a group. I mean, the stuff that's emerging is sort of outrageous. There's a place in Florida that you can just go and sign up and go do an ayahuasca ceremony. Like there's a lot. Um, and there's a lot of perspectives. So please know that Michael Pollan comes a little bit more from this place of try it once and then you're done. Other people are like, build a relationship to something over time. Um, some people feel strongly about using one substance only at a time. Other people like combining things. Some people encourage doing things in a group. Other people are like Terrence McKenna was so big into sit down, shut up, and pay attention. Don't engage with anyone. Don't put an eye mask on. Don't just shut up and listen. So we have these perspectives all over the map, and they're all valid. I personally come from a place of starting low and slow and getting to know a substance intentionally over time. That's just my orientation. It's not right or wrong. But what I will say is that what I think psychedelics do for us is I truly believe they are a huge gift to us, a huge gift. And each one carries unique and specific medicine for us that helps our unfolding evolution and involution, this sacred marriage of spirit and matter that we've talked about. And I think there's something really special about how each one of these does that. Um, they help us sort of juxtapose ordinary reality. They help us unlock a fixed way of being and show us a new perspective. They help free up some of the burdens we're carrying. They can really support us to unwind trauma in the right context. They offer wisdom unique to us. They help us practice surrender, letting go, receiving, and trusting. They help us confront things that are hard to do alone. And they are all, at least the four I want to talk about today, a form of death practice. So let me stop there. And that's a bit of an intro. And let me do one more piece, which is I'm going to share my screen with you. And this is related to trauma. This is what I'm calling deep dive practices. And this can be applied to best practices for both working with trauma in our systems as well as working with psychedelics because they're very related. Whatever we tend to, especially if it's intentional, especially if it's that from that entheogenic perspective of I'm going to do this to deepen my relationship with self, instead of I'm going to go have a party with this, that's a very different intention. Not bad or good, just where I'm coming from is, the deep internal dive. And they will bump up against trauma. They will. That's part of what they do is they relate to the deepest parts of ourselves. And that's where we are holding on to stuff. And it's often said in many traditions, it's really wise to have an ego before you try to dissolve it. Really wise to have an ego before you try to dissolve it. And that, sometimes when we're young, we can get hit with a particularly difficult experience, whether that's loss, death, abuse, and it can grow us up quite young. Being on our own, very young. But if we haven't had that, then midlife is a really great way to start to hit that wall of like, okay, I've developed my ego, I've developed my identities, I've developed myself, and they don't mean anything anymore. And now I have to try to dissolve them, right? That's a natural process. We all hit midlife and then we're like, what? Everything I thought was important is not important anymore, or it's changing, right? And when we're young, it's really important to develop an ego. This is how we learn to take care of ourselves in the world, take care of others, right? So these are the 5 sort of practices that I think about as best deep dives, meaning if you're going to be working with trauma or if you're working with psychedelics, it's really best to have a guide. I mean, I've done plenty of psychedelics on my own, and my life changed when I had a guide. It changed everything. And I'm a sort of, I can do it all myself kind of gal. Like, I got this. But having a guide, much like having a counselor when you're dealing with trauma, is a nervous system to hold this space for us because our systems really can't surrender fully unless there's someone holding some space. Really important to find a guide you like, you trust, and you develop a relationship with over time. Super important. If you're interested in a guide, I have a friend, some of you who took my class at the beginning of the year, she was in that class. I can recommend her, so contact me separately. It's best to have a relationship with your inner life. If you haven't done inner work, if you don't know, if you don't have a sense of your eternal self, then psychedelics might just blow you out of the water. So it's really good to have a relationship with your inner life. And it's best to have support structures beyond your guide, friends, community, family who are supportive of a process you might be going through. And then a container context for your experience. In the medicine world, it's often called set and setting, set and setting. And it's basically like, where's this happening and what's the ritual around it? And is there ceremony and is there music and who's helping with intention setting? And how do we, have a beginning, middle, and end that feels nurturing and supportive? And then wade in slowly. Dosages are really important around wading in slowly. Really, really important. We're going to talk about that. Any other best practices from those of you who have explored this world? Because I know for sure there's a couple of you here, but maybe others as well. Specifically, recreational use is awesome, but I'm really here referring to ceremonial sacred use. Lumen.
Forgive my half full mouth. Yeah, I would say another extraordinarily important piece is integration.
Beautiful.
A good guide will help work with that element of it. But I mean, we can do all the psychedelics we want for the rest of our lives and never really get very far if we're not actively integrating the insights that are being offered in those journeys.
Well said, beautifully said. Thank you. Yeah, a good guide will have a pre-session and a post-session at the very least, and some will actually require ongoing weekly support and therapy before even journeying. It depends on a lot of things. If you're already in therapy and this is sort of a one-time drop-in, it might be different, but really good. Thank you, Lumen. Other psychonauts want to add anything?
I just want to say I live in a place where there's a lot of quote unquote spiritual prostitution of psychedelic plants. And so it's very important to recognize and acknowledge the like historical and ancestral traditions that have been using these for many generations before us. And if you feel so, culturally inclined to seek out a guide that is culturally informed and ideally even from these cultures where they come from. And there's plenty of them. So,
Yeah, thank you. That's really important. Of the four that I'm going to talk about today, only one of them, psilocybin, has deep ancestral native ways, and the others are interestingly not. But yes, beautifully said. And what Sarah means by spiritual prostitution is that people go down to Peru, white people go down to Peru who don't have much experience, and then they start selling medicine journeys to visitors and travelers without having any anchor in the tradition and lineage. And this is directly flying in the face of people who have lived there for ever, and it creates a bunch of chaos and problems not only for the people who are going through the experience, but culturally and in the community. Is that how you would represent that, Sarah?
yeah, and it also just allows for a lot of like energetic leakiness and abuse to happen for people who don't really know what they're doing. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
a lot of people come here for that purpose. So just a warning on that. There's a lot of that
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. There's a lot to wade through around finding the right resources. Brenda and then Lumen.
Yeah, that is really important. Preparation, integration, maintaining sacredness. I wanted to comment about psychedelic use at end of life. I work with people who, after they've received a terminal diagnosis and they need to kind of quickly get on their spiritual path and start working with, with their spiritual awakening. And it's just important that the idea is that psychedelics are not used at the very end of life because transition, and I had to step away, so I don't know if you already talked about this, but the transition period, the last like few weeks of life, or even in the dying process, it's really important that we not interfere with that sacred process, and so that's just something to keep in mind too.
Yeah. Yeah, I love you, Brenda. So fill in the gap so beautifully. Yeah, I think that's great. I made a note for myself to say that I'm not an end of life guide in any way. I am all about preparation well before that happens, and we have our own um endogenous DMT that starts to be released at the end of life. And we don't, like Brenda's saying, like, oh, just that's not the time to start anything. But if we're enough away from a decline process and at any age and stage, there's definitely ways we can safely and healthfully step into these pieces. And it depends on the substance, and we can talk some about those. Lumen.
The other piece that came up uh, for me too is the dieta, or like the diet, or just like being really mindful about what you're consuming mentally, as well as physically, when preparing for such a journey.
Yeah, yes, thank you. So the four I'm going to be talking about today is ketamine is one, MDMA is another, psilocybin is the third, and 5-MeO DMT, which is toad medicine, is the fourth. I don't feel qualified to talk about ayahuasca. It's not my tradition. It's not a space I've occupied. And that's the ultimate death practice in a way. I would say 5-MeO rivals ayahuasca in that way, but I'm not qualified. It's usually done in a group. It's really good to find a church or an ayahuascaro who is, a medicine carrier or lineage carrier. And I think it's really important to make sure you find a process that feels good to you. I have been in a situation with an ayahuasca that I didn't resonate with, and it's not a great experience. So that's all I'm going to say about that because I just don't feel qualified to talk. But these other four that I'm going to talk about are more accessible and a little more secular and a little more less laden with some of the issues that Lumen and Sarah are bringing up, which is diets and traditions and lineages. And so it's a little easier for the average white person to traverse into those realms. So that's why I chose these four. And let's just take a breath for a minute and just settle in our systems. There's a lot of excitement here and beautiful information. Jeannie, I see your hand.
I just had a question. I have tried all the different realms of like psychedelics over the past, say, 15 to 18 years, and none of them ever resonate with me. And I always found that so interesting because I am one that dives into the realms of inner work and exploration. And I always walk away with a feeling of like, oh, yeah, I never need to do that again. Like it was cool or it sucked, right? But I walk away going, oh, I never need to do that again. Where I find my expansion is in more of the simplicity of stuff like meditation, dance,
Yep.
connecting in women's circles, going within myself without these.
Yeah.
But so I guess I've always questioned myself, why?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's beautiful. And it sounds like you're sensitive and tune in and navigating well enough to be able to find those things through means that are resonant for you and don't have substances. Plenty of people I know, and this was I have a part in me too, is I don't want to have to use substances to go there. And that's completely legitimate.
Mm-hmm,
Um, and if you're asking why, I could, if we had a deeper conversation, I would say, well, tell me about your guide, tell me about your set and setting, tell me about your relationship with that particular substance and how deep of a relationship do you have? Tell me about your intention setting. So there's so much about it that
mm-hmm,
could be explored if you were like, is it me? Is it just not hitting me? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's just so much complexity to it,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, cool. Well, when we do our session, we'll bring that in because,
right?
yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Should we keep going or should we take a break? There's a lot of like buzz at the moment. Who feels like they need a break? Raise your hand. Nobody. Okay. We'll keep on the edge of our seat here. Carla, did you have a question or do you need a break?
No, I was in another class, so I actually just got here. But to kind of piggyback on what Jeannie was sharing, um, I have I've only done psilocybin, and that was recreationally like 50 years ago. But the people that I know that have used psychedelics, um, I think it needs to be part of a larger protocol. Because the three people I know that have done it were really disappointed that they used ketamine and psilocybin, and then it didn't give them like total enlightenment and freedom from all of their struggles.
That might be the
And
problem. It's that
it's like,
expectation.
yes, putting too many expectations on it as being like the magic solution. And we're multisensory beings. And so, like, when I listened to them, I was like, well, no wonder you were disappointed. Um, And one of them takes antidepressants, and she's been in therapy on and off for years. So it's not like she thinks this is the only thing, but she thought it would be the perfect solution.
Yeah. Well, thank you,
So I
Carly.
think
Yeah.
setting
Yeah.
yourself up if you expect that from a substance.
You're setting yourself up, yeah, to say the least. That's great. Okay. Um, so again, my orientation here is how to use um, beautiful, special sacraments as death practice. That's really, just that's where I'm honing in. And because this course is about how do we develop a relationship and an intimacy with death, there's some tools. And the caveat of so many things that I've already given. So I'll just do a quick run through in all of these, probably no more than 5 minutes each. And I'll stop at each one because some people may have more experience than I do. And then we'll take a break. And then we'll go into breakout rooms. And we have some different breakout rooms to choose from today. And they're not all about psychedelics. So if you're not interested in this topic, great. Can get into a different breakout room about something different. So I'll just say really quickly that ketamine was developed as a animal tranquilizer in the mid 60s, and it's used for anesthetizing cats mostly. Um, but it's sort of become popularized, especially more recently, as it's an anesthetic and a dissociative. And at low doses, it makes you feel a little inebriated and dreamy and sort of stumbly or clumsy. And then at increased dosages, it takes you sort of into a deep, more psychedelic place. And um, often people think of it like it's happening all over the country in psychotherapist offices. And again, you can sort of sign up online and get it. It's usually a white powder. It can be snorted. It can be injected. It's like it can be little IV drip or an injection in the doctor's office, and it can also be boofed, which it can be taken rectally. And it's one of the more psychologically addictive substances, particularly if people are trying to avoid being in their bodies or working out their trauma. And it's still illegal to possess outside of having some kind of license to do it. So I'm pretty sure that's true. And for me, it's all about intention setting. And when doing this medicine, um, it does actually give one the experience of leaving the body. So it's not as much a support for this embodied dying piece, but it is helpful when it comes to what is it? The juxtaposition of having a body and not having a body. That's what I find it best as. Like, what's it like to be in here and what's it like to not be in here? And so I think when using it for a death practice, bringing an intention to it around that. And I've gotten some really powerful connections to my own death archetypes through this medicine. And the best, and it's also a bit of a reset. If you're going through something difficult, ketamine can reset. They're using it for depression, modifications, around depression and long-term illness. They're having really great success with it. I have the link to the Arrowhead basic overview of it in the resources. Big concerns: do not be around bodies of water of any kind, do not operate, do not equipment or drive, like really basic stuff. but you can become completely anesthetized in a way. It's called a K-hole. And you drop into a very deep place with it while your breathing and circulation is still completely online and fine, which is why it's used as an anesthetic. Anybody else have anything around how this has been helpful for them and how it might be helpful specifically for a death practice? I find that it's very, very gentle and very pleasant. And the idea of, oh, I might die, I almost get the experience of like, this is what it might be like as I leave my body. I often bring a death intention, and it's very, very gentle. It's the most gentle of the four in some ways. Um, Brenda, do you have thoughts about this?
Sure. So I am a, excuse me, I am a certified ketamine assisted therapy provider. And the idea is the therapy part, the part of preparation and having a guide and integration is really important. A lot of ketamine is being used now as a drug and not nearly as helpful. For me, during my experiential sessions, during my training, it definitely, for me, really allowed me to embody the whole idea that I am not my body.
Yeah.
Because I was completely out, my body was in like puzzle pieces floating on the ceiling during the entire, and it also completely erased my fear of death because of the where I went in the journey. And then at the end, I realized that there was a chance that my body was not going to be put back together. And I even had the thought that I'm going to be the first person in this training to die during a ketamine. You know, I was like, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to. And because of what had happened during the journey, I had completely come to peace and accepted the fact that I am not going to live forever and that death is not a scary thing and things like that. And so I was completely, there was no anxiety. There was only comfort and peace and joy and love with this whole idea that I was no longer going to be. So those are just a couple of things that happen to me, but I just want to put it out there. There's a lot of ketamine that is being, misused in a way that's really kind of scary. So
Yeah. Thank you. Wow, that is powerful. Really great way. I love the way you said, it really helps us get in touch with consciousness that we are not our body. And, I love that piece. Your body was in pieces on the ceiling. Was it ever going to come back? There's not a lot of risk of fatality with this illness. With this medicine. And the biggest concern is people who use it and then do crazy things like be around water, because then you're paralyzed and you're around water and you can't function and people can drown or other things. I know there's so much more that everyone desires around this, but any last comments or input around ketamine? Ketamine as a death practice. It's the most accessible one, really accessible if you have any kind of, there's lots of providers everywhere in the United States. Lumen, yeah.
Yeah, I would just also briefly add that in my experience of ketamine versus all the many other things that I have sat with, um, when you say accessible, I wonder if you want to talk about what that means. For me, what I hear and what I'm reminded of is like how just like easy in it is to go so deeply in or so deeply out and then come out and be like back to my regular self. Like I can go on a full journey within like under 2 hours and then be like ready to go to that family reunion if I need to or something. So that feels accessible to me. That's an example of accessibility
Beautiful.
to me.
Yeah, beautiful. You might want to leave a little more time than 2 hours, but what Lumen is saying is true. It comes on quickly. It takes you for a ride quickly. It comes down quickly, and then some versions of it have a longer half-life, meaning like you'll feel some bits for a while. It depends on how you're sourcing the medicine. Yeah, and dosages are really, if you're sensitive, you want to start really low. And I think I'm just gonna again and again say like this is one that you can go to a certified, like Brenda's certified. She does this. Like find someone in your area that is doing it who's deaf literate. Like that would be like the cat's meow right there. Um, the anesthetized cat's meow. Brenda, yeah.
Just real quick again. And, the physicians who do the ketamine, they want to have an indication. And since I didn't have depression or anxiety, it was more for spiritual exploration and death exploration. I actually did a survey and found out that I had significant professional burnout. And that ended up being a indication to receiving ketamine. So there's a pretty expansive indication list so that you could qualify at a clinic. I'll also say that despite the brevity of the session, which could be as little as 20 to 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes, at least with my experience and with a lot of people I know, I actually had over almost a year's worth of content that I was able to integrate and explore from that one session. So the idea also is to, if you're going to try ketamine or breath work or whatever you're going to do, to give yourself time to actually explore the material in a really deep way. And not do repeated. I know people who do repeated sessions, and I just wonder how much that you could actually get more out of it if you were to just let it, sit and process.
Beautiful. And please know that we all have different relationships to different things. Like I am still personally working out my relationship to ketamine and don't know how I feel about it and have not had as profound experience as Brenda. And I'm like, I'm in an ongoing, slow, long-term relationship with it where I'm in inquiry. And it's not earth-shattering for me. It's little bits and snippets of wisdom here and there. And we all have our thing, we all have our thing that is the sweet spot for us. So, Brenda's, yeah, beautifully said. And sometimes we find a thing that's like, wow, it really worked for me. And then someone had that experience, will have that experience and other people will not. So just keep that in mind. All right, let me do one more and then we can take another break. This is the next one, which is MDMA. And the reason why I love this as a death practice is sort of a little counterintuitive, but I'll just say a little bit. It's also called ecstasy. It's also called Molly. It's a euphoric. It is said to really open the heart. And it's a methamphetamine. And in all cases here, if you're on any kind of SSRI or what are the other ones called? The MO. Oh, the other I'll find it, but any antidepressant you're going to have to be very vigilant in your research and talk to the person who prescribes that to you because it can have really negative effects or it can limit the effects or it can screw up your brain chemistry. So it's really important. This is the most recreational drug of all of the ones that I'm going to be implementing. It's really well known in rave culture. You take this and you go dancing. And because of that, it has become, has a reputation as a street drug, and it can be mixed with other things like ephedrine and caffeine and amphetamines and sometimes fentanyl. Like it's not something you want to get from a, irreputed, someone you don't know. And there are MDMA testing kits that can help give you a general sense of what's in it. Um, and there's dosages. I could say a lot about dosages. I was doing guiding for quite a while. And the reason that I love this medicine so much is that and what MAPS is an FDA approved organization, multidisciplinary approach to psychedelics. You can look it up. MAPS is an organization, and they got FDA approval to work with MDMA. The reason I love it so much is that it's proving to be incredible with working with complex trauma issues, acute or complex trauma issues. What it does is it takes the amygdala offline, and the amygdala is sort of the fear center in mammals. And it allows us, when we have strong intention and we have a guide and we have a container and we have integration systems and we have all of that, it allows us to come at a very traumatic process, something in us, whether that was a one-time thing or a complex thing, and unwind it permanently. It's permanent change. And we don't fully know. This medicine is such a gift to us. We don't know fully how that happens, other than we're able to, like, the fear centers are disabled, the heart is open, and we are often able to see, process, and experience what happened to us, move through the emotions of it, and then somehow see it as a gift, see it for the gifts that it is. And the reason I think of this medicine as important to a death practice is because working with these complex things, these are the things that stand in the way of us fully trusting life and ourselves and our bodies and our incarnation and our temporality. It's also an illegal substance in the United States. MAPS recently they had been getting the green light from the FDA, and then they got the red light, and so things expanded and then contracted. There's all sorts of politics going on around this stuff. I don't keep up with it all. It lasts longer than ketamine. It comes on fairly quickly. It lasts 3 to 4 hours at the low end and can go on beyond that. Really nice to do with a guide, particularly someone who's trauma versed and informed and has been working with you specifically about trauma. There's lots of challenges with MDMA. So some of the challenges are, for some people, there can be a crash or a hangover. The purer the medicine, the less that's true. You have to be careful what you're doing while you're on the medicine, because there can be, if you're out dancing all night, you can have dehydration, you can have hypothermia. But if you're in a contained situation, like a very sacred process, it's unlikely to happen. There's issues about drinking too much water, not enough water. There's a sort of it's a whole water thing you can research. Really going in with intention is good, because if it's stirring stuff up that you don't get complete, and you don't have good integration, that can shake your world up. And then some people feel that there's a real toxic component to this medicine, and can be hard for people who have some kind of chronic illness. So you would definitely need to look at contraindications. Oh, the MAO, right? The MAO prescriptions like Marplan or Nardil or Harnate, any kind of antidepressant, and the SSRIs, you have to be mindful. So there's more warnings with this medicine. There's other high blood pressure questions. So research all of that stuff. Psychologically, I'm just reading my notes there. It can be psychologically addicting because it feels really good. And again, my orientation always is how do I use this for my own building my relationship with consciousness and unwinding the things that I need to unwind to help that prevent me from being fully in my own organic, ecstatic state. But it's taught me a ton. Anybody else want to share about their experiences with this medicine, particularly in the context of, a container? Heather.
Yeah, I really appreciate all the information you just shared, Lee. And yeah, there's so many considerations when it comes to communing with MDMA. And I have personally found it just life-changing for me personally in terms of trauma healing. And I agree, you want to ingest, from a reliable source. And because it's just, you know, over the last like 4 decades, it's just increasingly been kind of contaminated. That's really important. And I, from what I've read, like microdosing versus macrodosing, since MDMA is not a classic psychedelic, it's an empathogen, you there isn't really microdosing with it. I mean, you can, but it's there's a certain amount that needs to be ingested to experience the effects of it. And like you were saying, it has that timeline, like, onset is maybe like 30-45 minutes, and like peak can be 3 hours, and then people are generally down by like 6 hours or so, but that can vary slightly. But anyway, it's I wish that the FDA approved it in August for PTSD treatment, but they shut that down, I think, from what I heard.
Yeah. Are they limited the scope significantly? Yeah. This can be super life-changing. Thank you, Heather. I have found a way to microdose it. Um, and I'm just gonna say this one thing, and you got to research it on your own because I cannot say more. It's called candy flipping, and it's a way to do less and get the same effects. And if you want to talk to me about it, let's do so offline. But it's a way because I am really sensitive and I have lots of crash hangover issues, and I have found a way to not to prevent that. So if you're one of those sensitive people and you want more about that, let me know, and I can give you some probably by text or something. Yeah, Lumen.
I just want to drop a note here, especially for like we're talking about MDMA. It's important for sourcing. I'd like to drop a note for testing kits.
Yeah.
Super inexpensive, really wise to have. You can test almost anything, and it'll give you instructions. They're reagent kits.
And you can just get those on like Amazon. They're just available, right? The testing kits.
Yeah,
Well,
so
you
I
put you
just
put
put the
put a
link
link.
here for
Great.
dantsafe.org. I love their organization. And
Great.
yeah, check it out. They have kits for literally everything.
Yay, wonderful. And I like buying from something like that instead of from Amazon. That's wonderful. Thank you. Brenda.
I'll just add, and thank you for that about the testing kits. I'll just add that you can go to your county health department and get fentanyl test strips because there's fentanyl in almost everything nowadays. And so that's something that they just give out with Narcan and so that and xylazine, things like that. But that would be available to your health department.
And if you have a reputable source, they might actually give you a printout from the lab that created it, believe it or not. So you could ask, and of course you're doing this in a place where it's legal. So
yeah, there's also psilocybin dose test kits now available.
oh, really?
Yeah, so those you can also see You know,
Potency? Does it test potency?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Fascinated by that.
They're relatively new. I first heard of them last year at Psychedelic Science 2023 in Denver. And that's where and I'm going to have to go look at
That,
at the company name on
that's
the
amazing
box.
because
I'll
potency,
send the link.
yeah, varies so wildly, so
Yeah,
wildly.
I'll send a link that you can put in the resource list.
Yeah. I would recommend in both of these medicines, like to do, the sort of eyes closed inward experience. And there's also group for both of them. There's group experiences. But I would say that a strong facilitation, strong intention is still really important if you're trying to get a spiritual experience out of these. Again, both of them can be used recreationally. That's not really what I'm talking about. Any other questions before we take a break? Questions, comments, y'all's input, so welcome, so beautiful. Thank you, Carl. I love the group field.
This may not be totally related to what we're talking about here, but like I've experienced some small traumas in my life and I'm just learning more about them. Is this something for that also?
Yeah.
Not large trauma, but okay.
Yeah, MDMA is so beautiful. It's just so beautiful and really the guide, as I guide people, it's like what's there? What's on top? What's there for you? And what could have roots in deeper patterns and how do we lovingly, I mean, it's very related to the sort of internal family systems work or the trauma work that is like, we're going to integrate everything. How do we love this part of us and bring it home and integrate it within us? And that, you know, it's just so beautiful for that and so gentle. So yes, and generally small traumas that you can pick up have roots ancestrally, have roots to what barriers in our lives that stop us from being our true essence and who we really want to be. So yes.
Could you say a little bit about integration? Does that look like?
Well, what I want to say first is, if you decide you love this medicine, do not do it any more often than every 6 weeks or 2 months. You need to let your body recover, and ideally a couple times a year. You know, so I'll just put that out there. And ask your question one more time, Carl.
I'm not clear on what integration would be, how that would look, like emotionally integrate.
Yeah,
Sounds like
my experience is that the day of an MDMA journey, there can be a lot of information, but the 2 days following can be just as much or more. And, making space to journal, making space to be internal, be slow in nature, really continue to get the revelations and the waves of integration in your own system, and then be able to have a conversation with your guide on day 2 or 3 to make sense of it all, to get feedback, to get reflection, to get support for, making sense, really, and being able to keep this really permanent change alive in you. Is that
that
clear?
helps. That helps a lot.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So exciting. All right. Let's take a break and come back in 5. Okay, I was going to do a breakout room today, but seems like there's just so much discussion. You might want to check the chat later because lots of people are putting really great stuff in the chat. I'm going to do this next one quickly. Psilocybin. There are dozens of species of psilocybin under 3 genuses, and so there's a lot to geek out about if you're into that. And psilocybin mushrooms grow across the world, certainly do grow in the United States. And usually what you would encounter is cultivated. Lots of people cultivate them in their own homes, closets, or bathrooms. They've been used by indigenous people for thousands of years. There is a lot of history, and probably the best experience is to work with an indigenous or native person in some kind of ceremony. There's a lot of medicine that they carry around this, and there's a lot going on in Mexico and in Peru and in other places where they are lineage holders of specific types. If you can find those things and really devote yourself to that practice over years, including the diet and the lifestyle and the spiritual traditions that come with that, there is a lot to be gained from that. That is its own spiritual path. I know several people who are on that path, and it's uh, probably the deepest process I has seen anyone in my life in. So if you can find something like that, great, and you're interested. Recreational dosages range from, half a gram, even under to a gram. But when we're talking about medicinal, spiritual, or ceremonial dosage, we're usually looking at significantly more. There are one-on-one guided experiences around with psilocybin, and it's likely to take you into some darker or scarier places, generally speaking. And you might also have euphoria or visuals or other things, but there may also be hard stuff that comes up. And part of the reason to have a guide is because they already know that's going to happen and know how to help you navigate. It's not very addictive psychologically or physically. One has to, especially at a ceremonial level, one has to sort of prepare. And it's a much longer experience. It's going to be anywhere from 2 at a very low dose at a low end to 8 or 10 or even more hours. There can be some nausea or vomiting or other unwanted experiences. Yeah, also the MAO inhibitors, the depression or anxiety related medications, you want to double check. If you're on any of those medications, you have to be very careful and research thoroughly. There's very little fatality evidence with psilocybin, and probably, some psychological ramifications if it's done outside of the context of supportive, a supportive setting. And if there's, a history of schizophrenia or mental illness in the family, you just want to be mindful of that. And then again, find guides who can navigate these realms. But, they are traditionally designed to bring us into connection with our own divinity. And they're quite safe and more readily available in settings that are supportive. And you can wade in to this medicine. You can try, very low dose and then get to learn how to sort of steer or surrender or relax or relate or feel the medicine that comes with this being. Because this one is, the other two I've discussed are not natural substances, they're synthesized substances. This is a very natural substance. And so, how do we get to really be in reverence to the medicine that this is bringing us and our transformation? Anyone want to say anything about psilocybin? Sarah?
I love microdosing. I think having a regular relationship with mushrooms is really powerful. Yeah, it's a really intuitive medicine, and like doing it consciously is really important also, but like having a regular, actually it was from Lee's recommendation to just like have a regular relationship with it as opposed to like a once-off thing where you're just, using it as a way to like yeah, just drop more into yourself on a day-to-day basis it's a really powerful way to use it.
Yeah, microdosing there's a lot of opinions out there on microdosing, but just in general, you're talking about like 100 milligrams in a capsule in the morning, 3 days a week, every other day, or 3 days on, 4 days off, and making time for spiritual practice journaling. Like you might take it when you're just waking up, and then you have an hour in bed where you're just going to be in your experience, and then you do that regularly. Like for 3 months, you make a commitment to 3 or 4 days a week. And this is its own protocol. And it's a very gentle way to have a relationship with this fungus, with this sacrament. So lots of people out there. I have a friend who makes up um microdosing protocol, like makes the capsules, has the protocol, has a whole bunch of stuff. So if you decide you want to try a microdose process, I can put you in touch with him, and he can set you up with everything you need. So I have lots of resources about all that stuff, so just reach out to me. I'm going to put my, Signal is an end-to-end encrypted 828-772-58. That's my phone number. And if you would get Signal, which is an app that you can have on your phone, and it's an end-to-end encrypted, and it's a really safe place to talk about this stuff. So if you want more information on resources that we best not to talk about here, just text me in Signal. Okay, psilocybin. Microdosing is great. Thank you, Sarah, for that. Brenda.
And the beauty of psilocybin is that if microdosing doesn't resonate with you, it's having the right kind of preparation and working with an integration specialist, you can have a transformational experience with even high dose, even not high dose psilocybin, and then work with what comes up in the journey for months. So that's
yeah.
the range of possibilities,
Yeah.
which really, because then it depends on what your intentions are and how does it, what resonates to you with you. And it just has that opportunity. It gives that opportunity for both ends of the spectrum.
I love that. Yeah, on one end of the spectrum is the microdosing, and on the other end of the spectrum is what Terrence McKenna always said, which is take 5 grams, sit down, shut up, and pay attention. And you did take 5 grams. Like I could not handle 5 grams personally. Like 2.5 or 3, and I am like turning inside out. So, be mindful of your own sensitivity. Um, but yes. And she has a way of going right to the place that we want to avoid if you're doing higher doses, right smack in there to the place that we are scared of. So, microdose is not going to create that. It's going to gentle you in. So, being mindful. Yeah, we're working our way up in intensity here, and the next one and the last one that I'll share with you is got big red caution flags on it. And it's called 5-MeO DMT. And it's also called toad medicine or bufo. And it's found in some grasses and some bark, but most primarily comes from the venom of the Bufo alvarius toad species found in the deserts of the Southwest and of Mexico. The toad is milked for its venom and then taken off and dried, and it turns into a resin. It is very, very potent and intense. There is no recreational value in this whatsoever. This is full on, I want to die. And it is, you have to prepare for this. Anybody here done Bufo? Just keep your hand up so I can see if you have. Anyone here? Okay, I don't see any hands unless I'm missing them. Okay. I also have a guide, really good guide in mind for this if anyone's interested. Okay, how to say, I just have so much reverence for this medicine. There's a great resource from Ralph Metzger, who wrote a book called The Toad and the Jaguar. And in medicine circles, this medicine is called the Jaguar. It is not joking around. It's smoked or snorted. It's not active orally. It is 4 times the potency of DMT and NDMT. And you can do literally as low as 3 milligrams. 3 milligrams. Generally speaking, you're going to do in the 6 to 10 range. And the medicine comes on in 10 seconds. The journey lasts anywhere from a minute to 20 minutes, and then you're done. But in that time, you're going to go through an ego dissolution process. You're going to completely lose a sense of your own identity and be unified with the void. And sometimes for people, that's a terrifying experience. And sometimes for people, that's ecstatic. It's still a controlled substance in this country. You absolutely must have a guide. Absolutely must have a guide. And something to be very, very, very careful about is dosages. There is, and I really need you to hear this because it's a bit crazy. There's a synthetic version of this. They have synthesized this in 5-MeO-DMT, so you can either get the resin from the toad or the synthesized version. The synthesized version is about 10 times as strong as the toad. And for me, I can do about 10 milligrams of toad. And when I first did it, I didn't know this information. Someone gave me 30 milligrams of synthesized. Nearly blew my mind. And this is what's happening. People in circles are going into space with people who aren't aware, and they're getting up to 100 milligrams of synthesized. It's really important to find a guide who can start you off at 2 milligrams and work slowly, slowly, slowly up. Same dangers here around antidepressants, and this drug it's not dangerous physically. There's been very few recorded deaths, but there have been with combining with alcohol or combining with other substances. Be careful of the MAO inhibitors. And the dosage thing is really crucial. But it has, if it's not done in the right context, there can be stuff brought up, psychological or mental issues that are brought up that are hard to integrate. So this is not for the faint of heart. This is not where I would start if you are not a psychonaut. It's not a very visual DMT. People have described it as the shattering of the universe, or the void. There's these Arrowhead has these great little articles by people who describe their experience, and they're awesome. They're called The Subtle Steamroller, or Trip to Infinity, or Implosion of the Universe, Beyond the Beyond. So there's a lot more to say about 5-MeO, but I will stop there. And I'll just bring this quote in from Graham Hancock, who says, "I think it's obvious that psychedelics are demonized and illegalized by our society because somewhere in our society are controlling minds that realize that these substances have the potential, have the power to unpick the controlling patriarchy." controlling hierarchy and patriarchy. It has the potential to undo control structures. I'll stop there. Anybody have 5-MeO offerings? Lumen, you have 5-MeO? Anything to say?
I think you covered it quite well. Guides are essential. Don't start there.
Don't start there.
Don't start there.
Yeah. Start there. But if you're interested, I have resources for you. And it's, the reverence that I have for this medicine is pretty extraordinary because, and if it's like, if you really want to take death practice seriously, this is the mother of all death practice. So, yeah, it's not for everyone. I am a psychonaut. That's great. All right. I'd like to leave a little time for Day of the Dead, the upcoming Day of the Dead, and what ideas of folks can honor and celebrate. Is there any more on the psychedelic component? I was hoping to do a breakout room where folks could talk about it and, roll around some ideas, but we just ran out of time because there's just so much interest and information. But you can talk to your buddy. You can reach out to me. Anybody else willing to be a resource for the group around some of these questions people might have? Are you at Lumen? Would you put your phone number? Are you also requesting Signal to do it on Signal or? Okay, so Lumen is also available. And if you want to text her, she'll put her number in the chat and also reach out to her on the Signal app. Thank you for that. Brenda, are you up for being a resource? Okay, sounds like Sarah is up for being a resource. Okay, great. So this chat is gold this week. It's got so much information, and Sarah's also Signal. Those of us who work with medicine really love Signal. So, and Brenda can be a resource on like really on ketamine, but also, and yeah, I love what Brenda put in the chat, which is like integration is meaning making. How do I make meaning out of my experience? How do I take it into my life? How does it transform my actual life? Not just be a fun ride, right? But really, yeah, make me closer to myself. What's the deal with Signal? Signal is an end-to-end encrypted messaging service, meaning we're not getting spied on. Yep. Carl.
How might I know we're studying the death process and everything, and I'm curious what a death practice might look like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If you could flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's as simple as how many times a day can I remember that that I won't exist for long? How, can I remind myself that I'm closer to death than to birth? Can I have opportunities to let go and make letting go, surrender, receiving any of these qualities that I've developed? How can I make those conscious? How can I think about what I want to experience in the moment of my death and practice that in my life? How can I take the characteristics that I consider for my good death and make them things that I continually revisit?
Thanks.
Is that helpful?
Yes, it is very helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Really great.
One question, Lee. I didn't know if you mentioned holotropic breath work. I had to step away a couple times this morning.
I did.
that's another way to do some inner work, also that would be similar to a psychedelic journey. And usually there are holotropic breathwork groups in most cities on occasion.
Awesome. Great. So you've got 4 people here who are willing to support and answer questions: Lumen, Brenda, Sarah, me, and maybe there's someone else. So if you have questions, okay, so Lumen put the correct number. She put the wrong number, that she has the correct number. So make sure you got her correct number. Brenda's also on Signal. Okay, great. You know where all the druggies are hanging out, on Signal.
I don't guide, I don't use, I do preparation and integration work. And I have a DA license I need to preserve. So I minimize harm and maximize the potential for benefit. That's
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
yeah.
it's from information purposes only, and we want to guide you to places that are gonna support you in ways that are holistic. Is really what it is. But all the funds happen over there on Signal, so. All right. Day of the Dead's coming up. We don't have a ton of time to talk about it, but I wanted to just show you the ancestor altar that gets created at Earth Haven every year, Earth Haven Eco Village, and it's beautiful. It's an opportunity to pull together everybody's beloved dead in one altar space. And then what we usually do is have a feast, an ancestor feast. And what that looks like is we make a dish that a beloved dead would have loved, or from the ethnic tradition, racial tradition, cultural tradition of our background. And we bring that dish and we talk about our beloved dead, or we talk about how that food is important to us and it feeds the ancestors. And that's a really sweet way to gather people, even if you just have a tea and a circle to talk about someone who's passed. Hosting an ancestor feast, Day of the Dead storytelling, visiting a cemetery or a place where ashes were scattered as an act of remembrance can be a simple thing to do. Lighting a candle in your own home or bringing flowers to an altar where you have some images of your beloved dead. It is said in many traditions that the veil between the worlds that separates us from the spirit world is quite thin, right around the end of October, beginning of November. Technically, it's November 2nd, usually is when Day of the Dead is celebrated. And so I just want to encourage and invite you to honor in some way the spirit realm where some or many of your beloveds are residing, existing. I'm doing a ritual this weekend called Grief and Eros, where I'm gathering with my Tantra community, where we're using erotic life force energy to be a gas pedal for the movement of grief in the body, and that we can, as we move grief in the collective, we are able to help each other move grief, because one of the things that we're even more illiterate about than death is grief. And so finding ways to practice and learn and be with each other as we remember how to be with grief in our systems, be held in our grief, and most importantly, like let it flow. So I'm gonna read the last quote from Richard Rudd today, this second one, and then we can share for as long as y'all want to share today. The fact of death leads us directly to the question of the purpose of an individual's life. The prime purpose at a physical level is to maintain your health for as long as possible. But there is another core purpose built into us to evolve. For a human being, evolution means creative uniqueness. We are each born with a creative purpose that no other human being carries. If you are to release your true creativity into the world, you must meet your own dark side. In other words, you must at some point face your deepest fear of death. And that's what psilocybin and 5-MeO will for sure help you do. If you haven't met your dark side yet, Those essences will help you. Anything about Day of the Dead coming up? Does anyone have any plans? Or have you done things in the past that might be inspiring to others? Mary Marty, please.
Hey, 6 years ago, I was doing pelvic bowl therapy because I had a prolapse. And I'd been working with this masseuse for about 6 months when Day of the Dead came along. And we made an altar at the massage room, and we invited ancestors, both personal ones and the general, and especially the Native women. We specifically invited women, but let me tell you who showed up. It was so beautiful. The room was full of spirits, so grateful to be there. It was just humming. Oh, it was so beautiful and amazing. I just like to encourage you to do that. The most important one for me was an aunt of mine who had died in the early 60s of cancer in her pelvic bowl. Said I was intentionally reaching out to her, and
I love how you blended the pelvic bowl exercise today with the Day of the Dead. That's
I know.
cool.
I thought you give me the perfect setup. So thank you. And
Yeah.
reach out.
One more link back to the pelvic bowl. When we're doing medicines, learning to undulate, learning to move with sensations through our bodies is really, really, really helpful when we're in altered spaces. And that whole that wave pattern, I teach people who are about to do medicine that process, and it's so helpful. So that's part of why the pelvic bowl was what we dropped into today. Hi, Gorka. And it's Hannah. So Hannah and James, who don't look like they're here. I think it's Hannah's birthday today. So happy birthday, Hannah, if you watch this from us. Our little Scorpio goddess. Blessings to those who have to leave, and I'm happy to stay here for folks who want to integrate and connect some more.
I just wanted to share my ancestral altar.
Yay. Oh, look at it. So beautiful. I love
And this is one of my favorites.
mm, it's sweet. I love the ball stones that you have there too. Those are great.
Yeah, one is magic merlinite, which is gabbro. And the other one is golden healer.
Beautiful.
This is gabbro, and this is golden healer.
Mhm. Anyone else have a Day of the Dead ritual for this time of year they want to share as inspiration?
I dropped a picture in the chat of an altar from last year. We've been doing this a number of years in my community. One of our community members was from Mexico, and the year his brother died, he started this tradition about 6 years ago in Arcadia. So yeah, everyone brings pictures and we invite folks. I think when COVID came, we did it outside, which under, a canopy or something, which had a specialness, but usually we do it inside the common house. And then people share foods and drinks. Grappa was somebody, her grandmother from Italy. So just a sweet other way of connecting with people and inviting in those memories. Great for grief.
It's very intimate to learn about our beloved dead. You heard this morning Linda's share, like it's very intimate, and it really lets us, just with very little information, it lets us into someone's heart when they share their dead with us. And yeah, it's very connecting to the other worlds. And so it can be simple. You might even with your buddy, just be like, can I tell you about my grandmother or grandfather? Becky. You're muted, love. You're muted.
Just saw that. Sorry. I had the opportunity some years ago to be traveling in Slovakia during All Souls and All Saints during that time period. And we were, one of the customs there in the villages is to go to the cemetery, take food, have a picnic, light candles, and be with the graves of your dead. And for us, we did have a family that we were interacting with, and we went to see Teta Silka, their grandmother. But the amazing thing was traveling at night from village to village and seeing the cemeteries in each village totally lit up with candles. It was just beautiful. It was beautiful, and it was such a, to know and to be part of that tradition was really special, and it's a memory that I hold.
And is it at night because it's all day and all night, or do they wait to go until night?
No, I actually don't know that. I
Okay.
don't know that. So that would
Interesting.
be a thing to look at. I should look it up. I should research it.
I never realized it was like, yeah, all lit up at night. Sounds beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Hmm. Any other thoughts or questions about any of this? Was a full day. I didn't prepare homework for you because I don't know, research, I suppose, and Day of the Dead. I can send it out in an email, but
Mhm.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week.
bye.
Bye.
Dara, we didn't have a chance to sing because it was so full. So maybe next time we'll leave some more time.
I just made the realization that I will be close to where my father's ashes are in a columbarium on All Saints Day.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
Yeah.
Bring some flowers. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
That hasn't happened in, well, the 30 some years since he died.
What a beautiful synchronicity. Bye, Carl.
Thanks, Lee. That was wild.
That
Thank you.
was a wild ride. Bye, Lenny.
I appreciate the information. Thanks for all your sharing. And since I'm in California, I'm wanting some resources in California, which I don't know if you East Coast people can provide or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of great resources in California. And I have a friend who travels actually also. So why don't you reach out to me and Signal?
Okay.
Yeah.
To use Signal, do I have to have a special phone on my end or just use my regular phone to call you on your Signal phone?
No, it's not it's just an app. You just download it from the App Store. Signal's an app. And then you can have it on your smartphone and then you text within it just like you would text through Messenger or just like you would text through anything.
Okay.
You
I
open
wasn't
it
aware
up
of
and
that.
then, it will ask you if you want to, connect with your contacts and then you put my number in there and then you just text me.
Okay.
It's a
Thank you.
regular texting app. It's just encrypted.
I like this idea. I didn't know this existed.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
opening my mind to new things.
Good to see you, Anne Marie.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.